This week's a little bit different than past weeks. Stacy's been fostering a stray cat in her office for the last couple of weeks, and the cat went out for surgery earlier this week. She normally works the night shift here where I come in the morning, I set up everything, I run parts, I get everything ready for her, and then she comes in the afternoon, we switch off, we talk about what's been going on, and then she'll work through the night normally. And this is how we get double the production done during the week than we would if both of us are just here working together. However, because the cat's out at surgery, she needs to be awake during the daytime so that she can be available for them to call us and let us know how things are going. His name is Thomas. He's having dental surgery done. So after the surgery, when he comes back, Stacy needs to keep a close eye on him and make sure that everything's okay and that he's eating. And she basically just needs to take care of him during the daytime so that if anything happens, she can take him back over to the hospital and make sure that he's okay. The way that affects us for our workflow is that now she's out in the shop running parts during the daytime and I can be in here doing the programming and design stuff that I like to do. For this week, I'm going to show you guys what we've got going out in the shop, which is instead of only JSP production stuff, I actually have 2 of our 3 mills running job shop work right now, which is really unusual. We don't normally take a lot of job shop work. We did in the beginning, but as our production increased and our sales increased, we didn't really have the time to take on the production work. So we usually just make our own products. One of the products that we're making for another company is something I want to show you, is a replacement center cap and dish set for old school Racing Hart Wheels. The company is Krager's Headers. We've had a relationship with Craig for quite a while now, and he's one of our last job shop customers that we make parts for. He does a really good job of identifying what it is that people are looking for in the market of old school wheels, and then he can figure out a way to reproduce them because it's very common for these old school wheels to survive, but the center caps and dishes to go missing over time. So let me show you the first center cap that we're working on right now. So most center caps nowadays are usually plastic injection molded, but in the 80s and 90s, it was very common to have aluminum castings or aluminum pressed sheet metal parts that are then finish turned. This is a Racing Hart Tracer, Type C Tracer center dish. This is an aluminum casting that is then finish turned, and it has a painted layer on the edge here to match the center of the wheel. This is one of the more complicated centerpieces that I make for Craig. The first step to remaking these is drawing these parts. So anytime I'm drawing a part that's round like this or circular, I'm gonna try to find a way to do a revolve extrusion. And the difference between a standard extrusion and a revolving extrusion is a revolving extrusion takes a profile of a part, like if you took the side view of something, like if I slice this in half, and then you rotate it around a center line and it creates a circular part. Let me show you the geometry. So the profile of this part is this area right here. Now this is a profile shape or a side cut of this part. And then you take a center line, which is probably this line right here, and you tell it to revolve that shape, and it does a circular drawing of that shape. Now there are some other features on this part that had to be added, like these bosses right here for these holes that go through. This is pretty simple to do. It's just an outside circle and an inside circle, and then those are extruded or added onto our revolved part. The center holes are cut out, and then we just add all of these little fillets around the edges so that we can machine them with a ball nose end mill. You can see the similarity in the part here. Now there were only really 2 small issues that came up when it was time to machine these instead of casting these. One was this pin right here, which is a locating pin for orientation on the wheel. I wasn't going to just machine a boss on here like this because it's a lot of wasted material and potentially that's something that could get damaged and then the whole center would be damaged. So what we ended up doing is just drilling out this hole and then we're pressing a roll pin in. And when we go out into the shop, I'll show you what that looks like. The second thing was these internal areas of this cutout are sharp corners, which is not possible to machine. So I just had to add a small fillet into this corner right here, and I'm machining that with a 1/16 end mill. The machining process is pretty simple. I start with the bottom and I cut out this entire bottom shape, and that gives me all of these circular bosses to hold on to for the flip side. So the part gets flipped over, it gets clamped into a soft jaw that's the shape of the bottom of the part. This is what the soft jaw geometry looks like. So as the jaw is closed, it just clamps on this outside shape of the part here. And that allows me to pick up the orientation so that I can locate this little keyway right here and I can chamfer that edge correctly. So here's the machine part. Got that Craigers logo on there. I'm gonna go into more detail when we go out into the shop. I'll show you guys how they fit onto the wheels and how they compare to the original ones and show you some of the small differences. Other stuff that's going on is we got all of the window cranks back from black anodizing, so I was able to put those together, and all of the black anodized window crank orders are shipping by tomorrow, which is going to be Friday, so the same day this video is coming out. We ended up selling more of the window cranks than we expected, so we ended up having to get more material in, so that's back in the VF2 running so that we can replenish our stock of window cranks, because we basically sold out of all of the first batch that we made, so those will be back in stock for you guys to order. Also this week is a little update on our Project 3rd Gen Prelude. I'm finally getting the H22 head stripped down and ready to take out to Arlington Machine to have it pressure tested, resurfaced, and just freshened up so it can go back on the new H22 block. I'll show you guys what that looks like. And if you're lucky, you might get to see Stacy pull her car forward about 3 feet and load a couple of parts. So all the wheel parts that we make for Craig are usually run on our DM2 Haas machine. I really like to use this machine because it has a 15,000 RPM spindle, which works best for doing all the surfacing on these round parts. These dishes on the table right here is what we're currently running in the machine, and this is a C5 center. The original of these is a stamped sheet metal part that gets the face finish turned. The C5s are a little bit different because on the Type Cs and the tracers, the nut screws onto a thread that's on the wheel itself. But on the C5, this center dish actually has a thread that the nut screws onto. So we make them out of 2 pieces. The center piece threads into the C5 dish, allowing you to have the thread for the nut to screw onto. These are a finished Type C center dish. These are very similar to the Type C2, which has a slightly different hole size on it. Let me show you the Type C wheel. Just like the tracer wheel, there's a center nut that screws onto the wheel, sandwiching the dish in between the two. The whole purpose of this is to hide the lug nuts and make it look like it's a center locking wheel. Here's an original Type C nut. You can see that it has a tinted blue powder coat to it. Craig goes so far as to actually replicate the gel center stickers that go into these nuts, so the replicas can look just like the originals. Now back over at the tracer wheel, here's the original dish, and it sets in the center of the wheel, again just to hide the lug nuts and make it look like a center locking wheel. We went through a couple different revisions to make sure that the fitment was as close to OEM as possible. This original tracer dish sits just flush with the top. It's a very good fit. Now let's put the billet center dish in and see what that looks like. I really like that even though the edge of this isn't painted, it still doesn't look out of place. It pretty much matches the top surface of the tracer wheel. But my favorite part is the contrast and reflection of that blue nut inside the shiny billet part. So we're about halfway through the production of all these parts for Craig right now. This is the remaining material for the Type C5 centers. This is the threaded insert that's going to go into the middle of these C5 inserts. Because the wheel doesn't have the threaded boss for the nut, this center dish has to have that boss for the threaded nut to screw onto. On the granite is all the material for the actual nuts themselves. Now we make the Type C and the C2 nuts for Craig. Running in the VF1 are some components for some shock absorbers that we make for a local company. Now I have an NDA with them, so I can't show you the actual parts, but it's usually in volumes of a couple hundred, and Stacy's the one that's usually running them because she's really good at that high volume stuff. It can be difficult to balance job shop work and production work as a manufacturer, but we usually reserve this VF1 for all of our odd jobs. The VF2 and the DM2 are what do most of the production work for us. So when we do have job shop work, it almost always goes into this VF1 machine. Over on the VF2, back in production is the window cranks. We sold just about all the ones that we made, so we got a bunch more material. You guys saw all this going on last week in the video that I made last week, so nothing new here. Just wanted to show you guys that we are making them, and they're probably going to be back in stock by the time you see this. Now, it's probably been a couple of months since any update on our Project 3rd Gen Prelude, and that's actually changing. I'm about half done with the next episode. It's going to go over part of the engine rebuild, some suspension stuff underneath the car, and a new transmission that we picked up. The short block is all cleaned up, ready to go, has new gaskets, new seals everywhere. The top surface is all cleaned. I've just got it protected here so that nothing gets in there in this machine shop. The transmission that came on the car turned out to be a Honda Accord transmission, so not the best gearing. We picked up this 5th Gen Prelude transmission, and while I was cleaning it, I ran into a couple of issues, and I'll show those in this next video. But the part that I'm most excited about is actually just the cylinder head. I've got this thing completely stripped down and ready to go to the machine shop. I pulled out all of the rockers, the rocker shafts, and the lost motion assembly, because all of that needs to be removed to get a valve job done, so the valves can be removed. I also removed all of the additional hardware, the water neck, all of the plugs that go on the ends of the cylinder head, the spark plugs, and any sensors that I didn't want to have damaged during the cleaning and machining process. Lastly, I picked up some new parts. This engine came with the factory flywheel and clutch, and I'm not a big fan of those. I like to put lightweight flywheels on Honda engines because it increases the rev speed, just makes the car a lot more fun. Also picked up an ACT clutch plate. So I'm really hoping after I get the cylinder head back, then I can do final assembly of the engine, attach the transmission, and drop the engine back in the car. That won't be the next episode, but probably the one after. Thanks for watching.